One of the most interesting, fulfilling, but also challenging aspects of being a political journalist or about the journey of a political journalist is the fact that you get to interact with a lot of politicians. Now, politicians are interesting characters. Some politicians are more interesting than others, partly also because they are that much more accessible, so you can understand them better. Also, let me just say with great humility that politicians are among the most interesting people you can find anywhere, most of all in a democracy. It may not apply so much to non-democracies for the simple reason that they have too few politicians. Every dictator is a politician, but those systems have too few politicians. Not India. India is filled with politicians of all kinds. But once again, one of the reasons some politicians become more interesting, more fascinating, is the reason that they are more accessible. You can get inside their mind because they also open up to you, and not just to you in particular, but to the media by and large. Now, among those politicians, I would say the foremost among those politicians, sort of for my generation of political journalists, among the foremost of those politicians who opened up to journalists by and large, even to journalists. Journalists didn't have to be there camp followers or fellow travelers or chamchas or even to be agreeing with them all the time or most of the time. So they even engaged with their critics. So one of those politicians was Arun Jaitley, whose birth anniversary falls today. Had he not been snatched away so cruelly by fate so early in life, 4 years back, on 24th of August 2019, he would have turned only 71 today. We know politicians have long lives. By those standards, in particular, he left too early. Now, when he passed away on a Saturday. National interest for that week had been published that morning. So I wrote an obituary on him. Now that obituary, I think people who made such a difference in our public life, both irrespective of whether they were in the opposition, as Arun Jaitley was for most of his political life, or in the government, as he was often enough under Mr. Vajpayee first, and then under Mr. Modi, where he was the most trusted minister in his cabinet, holding multiple portfolios: finance, defense, corporate affairs, law, all kinds of portfolios. Sometimes it looked like he was like half of the cabinet. He was definitely half of the CCS. Now, when he passed away, I also wrote some. It's not really an obit, it's an obit come tribute, come also a bit of a political take on him. And I thought, since this is the anniversary, I will share this with you. Those days, we never converted, we never presented our articles also in the video version. And I know you like watching these, so I'm sharing this with you. Some of these, including this one, will also feature in my new collection from National Interest, a new selection from National Interest, which should be out in the next few months. We are working on it, as I had mentioned to you. I'm still waiting for you to send me some names. Several have come in. They are very interesting, so competition is intense. And I told you, whoever gives me the name that we select for the book finally, I will find a way of sending a really special note of thanks to the person. So please go ahead. Every article that features in this book, this collection of national interest articles, doesn't have to be necessarily a national interest article, because there will also be articles like these which got written in the middle of the week. But remember what? Politicians, as I said early on, are very interesting people. Also, when they speak, you can figure out where they are coming from, where they are headed. Sometimes they tell you the truth, sometimes they tell you half truth, sometimes you read them between the lines, sometimes they tell you an untruth, but you figure out that they're telling you an untruth. That is where our skills are also tested by politicians. Now, I take I take politicians very seriously. That's why you find that the mugs that we have, it says, these mugs say, because politics matters. Because without politics, a democracy is nothing. And that's the reason I hosted Walk the Talk on NDTV for almost 15 years. But when we finished Walk the Talk, when we stopped doing Walk the Talk any further, because the print started then, and all my time had to be devoted to the print. What did we do? We published a selection of our political interviews. are interviews with political figures under Walk the Talk. And these were published, and a selection of these conversations were published by NDTV and Rupa in this book called Walk the Talk, but the real title is Decoding Politicians. So this is only talking to politicians. Check it out if you find it. Now, Arun Jaitley, this is what I wrote about him. Within hours of his passing away, also we knew that he was on his way out because he had been put on life support about a week earlier. He had fought really in a way so cheerfully. He had fought the worst kind of sicknesses. He had fought them with almost the kind of equanimity, a little bit of cheer as well, as you saw, for example, with Rajesh Khanna playing Anand in that famous movie. Now, here is what I wrote on that day. Look at the headline of that article, and the headline also tells you something about the character and the style and the method of the person we were talking about. And the headline was not another, my friend Arun Jaitley a bit, courage, cancer, a big heart, and some S.T. Burman. So the last time I met him before he was moved to the hospital for the final time, he was quite unwell already, quite fragile, and he said he was only allowed to meet one person a day or one friend a day. On one of the earlier meetings at his home, again, he was still in quarantine and he could only meet very few people. So a few months earlier, he said, भाई देखो शेखर, तुम्हारे लिए मैंने ये एक बिल्कुल डाउनलोड किया हुआ है. ये सब S.T. Burman के गानों के वीडियोस हैं. All of these are videos of S.T. Burman songs. So those were the shared interests besides politics, cricket, and many other things. And that's why the mention of S.T. Burman in this headline. So here is what I wrote in that obituary. I wrote that the flood of my friend Arun Jaitley obituaries will tell you much about the life of a remarkable public figure. Unfortunately, it was a short life. I said, please do read those, as I shall, and if they don't tell you that personal friendships transcended political rivalries for him, then I will remind you upfront that in his study for years now, he had only two framed portraits on his desk, Madhav Rao Scindia and Lalit Suri. With this, I will take a break from politics and speak about the most inspirational side of his personal life. In a mere 15 years, between the young age of 51 and 66, Arun Jaitley faced more serious sickness than any public figure we have known. Did anybody see him complain, betray a trace of self-pity, or an exasperated, why the hell is all this happening to me, a sense of victimhood? No. You have probably seen a person make light of battling the most crippling terminal sickness before, but only in the movies, like Rajesh Khanna's Anand. In real life, not many would be dealt such a cruel hand by the health gods. A quadruple heart bypass after he collapsed while walking in Lodi Gardens, his favorite Lodi Gardens, for walking as well as gossip. This happened in 2005 when his big troubles began. A crippling hospital infection in the chest after his bariatric surgery to reduce weight and control diabetic complications in 2014. That is just when the political turn in the country was taking place and Modi government was coming into power. Modi-led BJP was coming into power with a majority. A kidney transplant in 2018 and a large, long and complex procedure at New York's Memorial Sloan Kettering Hospital for excising a connective tissue cancer from between his knee and thigh in 2019, earlier in 2019. It was, as we understand, a particularly nasty, aggressive cancer, a clear cell carcinoma as it's called. American surgeons thought they had removed the monster, all this happening to a human body which was still learning to accept new kidneys and surviving with rock-bottom immunity. Organ transplants are followed by heavy steroidal medication to suppress the body's immunity to prevent organ rejection. A body on heavy steroids with new kidneys now had to endure a long and difficult cancer surgery and all that came with it. Imagine and shudder. Yet, when Jaitley returned a couple of months before he eventually passed away, when he returned a couple of months earlier than that, he was still the same smiling, compulsive gupshup, not the same as gossip, gupshup. It isn't as if he didn't want to talk about his sickness. His wasn't an act to hide his trauma. He wasn't putting up an act to hide his trauma. He talked about it more than you would dare to ask and in great detail. It is just that it was all about how brilliant his doctors were, how great modern surgery and modern medicine were, how dedicated the military doctors and nursing officers looking after him 24/7 were. This started when he was defense minister, Raksha Mantri. He talked about how his kidney transplant was over like a breeze, no pain, no trouble. You don't believe me? Ask Sushma. He was referring to Sushma Swaraj, of course. You don't believe me? Ask Sushma, he would say. These AIIMS doctors, All India Institute of Medical Sciences doctors, they are so brilliant, he would say. And then he would reel out the numbers of transplants successfully done by them compared to the most famous American kidney surgeons, transplant surgeons, almost as if comparing some cricketers' scores and averages. This cancer treatment, however, did not work in his case, Arun Jaitley's case. Some rogue cell from that awful cancer had survived the Sloan Kettering surgery and invaded his lung. Within a couple of months, AIIMS doctors, led by its formidable director Randeep Guleria, among India's foremost chest specialists, you saw a lot of him during the COVID wave on TV channels, they noticed a large and growing fluid formation in that same lung. The surgeons at Sloan Kettering had failed to drain and clear that lung. Jaitley had returned, nevertheless. He was, however, already on a very aggressive and new chemotherapy. Yet, the last time I met him at his personal residence in New Delhi's Kailash colony, his family leaned on him to vacate his official residence to Krishna Menon Marg as they thought its Vastu was bad for him. There wasn't a flicker of pain or pessimism in his voice. What did he say? He said, and I quote, I'm now only on oral chemo. Intravenous is gone. All dietary restrictions are gone. So I have ordered a samosa each for you and me. These AIIMS doctors, they are so wonderful, the best in the world. In a 10-minute procedure, they took out that fluid. What Sloan Kettering doctors could not do or wouldn't dare to do for 2 weeks. Another 6 weeks and we will have clarity on how well my chemo has worked and so on. It was full enthusiasm. His morale was way up there, almost in the context of his health, gung-ho. He was now a bit distant from day-to-day politics, though he did mention with great affection the fact that the Prime Minister even now called to check on him almost every evening, no matter in which time zones they were. He said he only met 4 visitors a day, people he wanted to spend time with. Just before you, he said, economist Arvind Panagadia was here. What did Jaitley talk about when he was done with politics? Cricket, which he ran for a long time in India, and personalities. It was Hindi films, and even more Hindi film songs. We will be eternally grateful to him for making such a radical difference to our evenings and to detoxify them from prime time claptrap. Don't watch news at prime time, he said. Watch the channel called Sony Mix. Between 9 p.m. and midnight, they run this fantastic program called Rehna Biti Jaye, he said, where they seamlessly play old Hindi songs. They have a great inventory from the 50s to the 70s, and it is the best thing you can watch in the evenings. He was right. In gratitude, the gift I took to him at our last meeting was the definitive biography of Sachin Dev Burman by Anirudh Bhattacharjee and Balaji Vittal. You can see the jacket on your screens. I am not sure if he was still left enough time to read this or not, but I know that if he was left any time, this is the first thing he would have read.